Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Yo, set your affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food, good mood, blood in circulation. One step at a time, yeah, that's how you make it. Set a goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to pick one thought, have some concentration. And if I make a mistake, it's called education. I try to do this every day, call it replication. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 So life ain't easy, yo, I think there's a reason though. Ups and downs, just like every different season, yo. Sometimes I'm high, other times I'm barely breathing, though. I always gotta fight and hide from the demons, yo. Negative thoughts are poison, they rot. Head full of flies, so here come the clouds. They'll never stop unless I can swap all the bad for the good in my head when I'm lost. Yeah, so I'ma fake it till I make it. Positive thoughts are overtaken, I got patience. One day at a time is how you operate a cadence. A flow, you grow, you show yourself a foundation. Stay away from all the shit that causes temptation. I know that I like to do it cause it's sensation. I live my life in my head like a narration. Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
All right, everybody, welcome back to day 2 of the Authentic Lawyer Summit. Yesterday was an incredible day. So many great talks on the mental health segment in the morning and the business development segment in the afternoon. And today I am incredibly excited for what we're doing this morning or this afternoon or evening, depending on wherever you are in the world, with our section on ADHD. There is not enough talk about this stuff in the legal profession, and I'm so excited for what we're trying to do here, which I'm not even sure has ever been done before, but it's certainly just the starting point of a number of initiatives for neurodiversity that we are looking forward to doing. I know we've got people here from all over the world, so in the comments, let us know who you are and where you are joining from today. Yesterday, we had people from, I think, probably 5 or so different continents, some people joining late in the evening, early in the morning, so let us know in the comments, where are you joining us from today? Keep those comments coming in. Don't be shy here and let us know where you're joining us from. As we wait for more of your comments to come in, there we go. We got, wow, Venezuela. Okay, we've got Philadelphia. We've got DC, so USGs. We've got lots of people joining us from Canada. We've got Israel again. Welcome back, Jonathan. Manitoba, amazing. People from all over the world, all over Canada, the US, and all sorts of other places, which is fantastic. This is an international event because ADHD, of course, is something that is not limited to certain areas, and it's something that so many people in the legal profession are, of course, dealing with it. All right, well, welcome, welcome. Keep those comments coming. We like to be extremely interactive. And speaking of which, let me move this over here. So I want to start with a couple questions for you, and keep your answers, throw them in the chat. So how many lawyers do you know who have publicly said they have ADHD? And if you want to say lawyers, we could say lawyers or even people in the legal profession. Maybe would have been a better way to phrase it. I got to fire myself for phrasing it that way. How many people? Let us know in the comments. Couple, hundreds, Let us know in the comments. Curious to see those answers as they come in. All right, Mo says 0. That is a very low number. Jonathan, lots. Monica, 4 or 5. See Anne saying 1. We got a mixed bag here. So I see more than I can count from some people, and I see some very small numbers from other people. Lots of nones in there. So what I'm hearing is for some of us, there are not enough, people we're seeing represented, and others you are very familiar with a whole lot of people. And I can only imagine it's a whole lot harder to speak about these things publicly, to work with your employer, all that sort of stuff, if you don't know anyone else who feels like they are dealing with the same things you are, which of course is a challenge. All right, what do you wish employers knew about ADHD, whether it's a law firm, whether you work in-house, whether you work for yourself or for a small organization? What do you wish employers knew about ADHD? Let us know in the chat. Some great comments coming in already. I'll just highlight a few here as they come in. So can definitely be an asset if used wisely. Obviously, it's a blessing and a curse, I think, in a lot of ways. In some cases, easier to control than others, but definitely, not only a negative, definitely some positives too. Sometimes people use ADHD, I guess, like they use the word OCD and like they use a lot of these other phrases to mean something they don't mean. And, I think sometimes the phrase ADHD gets a bad meaning. The definition of ADHD, it's a terribly named condition. It's an executive function condition, as we all know. It is not an attention condition for the most part. Couldn't agree more. Neurodiversity to be celebrated, not ignored. I think it is often a positive thing. Of course, there are obviously drawbacks. Someone saying it's got to be harnessed and things like that. Fair enough. I think this one is fantastic. I wish they actually knew what it actually is rather than the lazy stigma. And I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of stories today from speakers who've been told over their lives they are lazy, they are undisciplined, if only they tried harder, all those common narratives that I've certainly heard about myself, and I know many of us have also heard. And again, it goes perfectly here. It's not a moral failing, but it is often treated that way. And that is a problem. We're here today to educate, to inspire, to hear from others, to give everyone, a sense of what people have gone through, realize they have allies, and at least get the conversation started. We are not going to solve all these problems today in terms of fixing the legal profession and how they treat diversity, let alone neurodiversity, but at least we're getting things started. One more question here. What would you like to see done to improve the awareness of neurodiversity, including ADHD, in the legal profession? Again, let us know in the comments. What are you hoping we can do, not just today, but with our initiatives that are to come after this? Think this one through, because this is the important one. What are we really trying to accomplish here, other than just raising awareness? Or how should we raise that awareness? What do you think will actually work beyond just a couple talks here? Give us tools to work with the situation. Amazing. So I think that's helpful. And I see from Mo as well, that there are tools again for ADHD that work for others. I could not agree more. There's so many things that I do with lawyers that I work with who have ADHD that actually are good for everybody. And I think people don't often talk about that. Open dialogue, could not agree more. We need to have more dialogue. This is just getting it started. And again, trying to make it a safe topic to discuss and really just educate in general. So that's what we're here today to try to do. We're here to try to get the conversation at least started, to hear from some people who have suffered and had benefits and all these kind of things from their own experiences. I'm assuming in many cases with employers who just didn't know what to do with them, didn't understand the accommodations that were needed, didn't understand how to harness the gifts that they had, as well as some of the challenges they had, and really start at least some education here. And I see so many thanks, Kyle. Your comment here is great. You'd like law firms to recognize that the practice of law is actually well suited to the ADHD brain, provided the administrative sorts are in place. I think a great lawyer, like ADHD, is a huge asset as a lawyer, but you need the right supports in place. And of course, without them, you're not going to have that. And I unfortunately don't think people understand enough. Most doctors, unfortunately, don't understand enough. It is tough to expect employers who are already struggling and so far behind in diversity and a million other areas to do this, but we got to get started. Dowell, you definitely don't have ADHD, and we've had conversations at our firm about ADHD, and I've sort of built even some stuff internally on like, hey, you got to manage the lawyers who have ADHD a bit differently. What have you sort of learned over the last little bit as you get started in understanding neurodiversity, and anything you want to talk about before we jump into our first talk today?
There's that old book that says, what is it, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, type of thing. And I know it's a very old kind of trite, but I used to think that, why can't I just, work with these people? Why can't I just figure it out? What's blocking them? And then eventually they came clean with me, and you've been very instrumental at the firm as well. When we realized that they just have ADHD and they just need to be managed a little bit differently. And understanding that changed a lot of things for me. I know that I have to give them a lot more structure, a lot more support, a lot more fences around, how they're doing it, but with enough flexibility, with enough openness that they can, flex, they can move around, they can improvise, they can kind of play jazz, but at the same time they have this playground in which they are able to play jazz. So for me, it was I'm still learning a lot. I have a lot to learn. I think today's session is going to be incredible because as someone who doesn't have ADHD, it's going to help me understand how to relate to my colleagues a lot better. So for me, that's the big takeaway. I'm excited. So even for people who are listening in, they don't have ADHD, keep listening, because I think I want to help my colleagues, my friends, deal with their work, with their life a lot better. And this is going to be a huge day for that.
Yeah, we know we've got plenty of people here with ADHD, plenty of people who don't, but are here to understand and learn better to how to support. And I'll just share a couple things quickly before we get into the first talk. And these are some things that people mentioned when they filled out their registration forms. So, one of the things people said, the stigma associated with ADHD and its perceived incompatibility with a career in the legal field. As we already have talked about a little bit, I don't think they're incompatible at all. I do think certain things are a little incompatible, but it's all about how do you manage those things. Um, Someone said, I'm especially interested in whether any of the speakers feel that they have either experienced themselves or heard through others about setbacks after they spoke up about their lived experience, i.e., this hesitation to even mention it because they're worried about how they're going to be perceived. And I suspect we'll hear plenty of that today. Someone says, I have tried pretty much every tickler system and task management system on the planet. Would be good to hear what works. I think we all know follow through and habits and all that works very differently for the ADHD brain. And certainly finding a way to stay organized is definitely a challenge for most of us. And then, of course, how to use the strengths that may come, at least in part, from ADHD, things like hyperfocus and intuition, while also managing the weaknesses from those things, especially in the early years of your career where some of the tasks you're asked to do are not as compatible with ADHD. So, lots to talk about. I am so excited for today's speakers, and we have an incredible lineup as always. I'm going to bring up Annie Little here, who's going to kick things off, and I'm going to get Dowell out of here. So, Annie Little, you may have seen her on LinkedIn or elsewhere. She is a lawyer career coach and a former lawyer who traded legal practice for career strategy and for coaching back in 2013, so a decade ago. She picks up where law school career services left off, which, as we all know, is basically at the beginning, and she helps lawyers to land, lead, and succeed in the legal profession and beyond. Today, she's going to be talking about ADHD, many lawyers' secret weapon, and the emphasis on secret. And before Annie kicks things off, keep the comments coming during her talk. Don't save them for after. Speakers love the encouragement. It helps them know they're on the right track and they cannot see you in the audience. So the comments, keep them coming. But Annie, I am so excited for you to be our opening keynote. So I'm out of here. Over to you.
Yay! Thank you for that lovely intro and everything about what people were writing it about. So exciting. And I'll be kicking things off with talking about how ADHD is many lawyers' secret weapon, and secret because of all the things that Aaron was just talking about. So it's directed at both people who have ADHD and people who don't. So welcome, everyone. So as Aaron said, I practiced law before, not so much now, but I practiced for 7.5 years, all with undiagnosed ADHD. And then I left to start my own business and become a lawyer career coach in 2013. And I got my ADHD diagnosis 8 years later at the age of 40 and promptly hyper-focused on all things ADHD because I never imagined that someone like me would have ADHD. And if you're not familiar with hyperfocus, it's similar to a state of flow, but it's like on steroids for the ADHD brain. So anyway, I was stunned by how little I knew and how much of what I thought I knew was actually wrong. And I think a big part of it was that I was growing up in the 90s. I was told that ADHD looked like hyperactive boys who couldn't focus and they did bad in school, got bad grades. I'm like, that's not me. But once I understood the ways that ADHD can show up in women and how it can show up in high achievers, there was like this huge wave of relief because like my whole life finally made sense. But like that wave of relief was pretty short-lived because it eventually crashed into this like ocean really of grief. And it wasn't grief about having ADHD. It was grief about for the life that I could have had if I'd only been diagnosed sooner. And it's not because I wish I could have accomplished more. I accomplished a ton. It's that I wish I would have suffered less. So the bottom line is that whether we're diagnosed or not, those of us with ADHD live in a world that wasn't created with us in mind. And then I went, and some of you went and chose a profession that presumes that nobody with ADHD could succeed inside it. Yet, high achievers flock to the legal profession. And some of you might already know, but an estimated 1 in 5 lawyers has ADHD compared to just 1 in 20 adults in the general population. So in all likelihood, either you or someone you work with has ADHD, but you may not know it for reasons that Aaron was alluding to earlier. But it behooves all of us lawyers to bridge our knowledge gap, which is honestly pretty vast, and work to eliminate the stigma that unfairly surrounds ADHD. So let's talk about the secrecy part, right? Like a lot of us aren't disclosing it. I certainly wouldn't, based on what I've heard my clients say. But here's one of the reasons why we need to learn more and make it less of a secret, because virtually nobody knows what ADHD looks like in a lawyer, not people who have it and not our supervisors. So, well, of course, it's not anyone's job to be going around diagnosing people with ADHD, right? At the same time, it is very helpful to recognize, like to be able to recognize for someone else, like certain patterns that you're observing or behaviors that you're noticing, and bringing them up to people and be like, hey, I'm noticing this. Like, what do you think's going on there? And I say this because it's happened to me, not with ADHD, but with anxiety. And so when I was at my first law firm, I represented lenders and I did commercial loan closings. And I went to one in person. I'm in the Philly area. And I came back and I was very shaken up. It was it's very dramatic. Like I actually needed like personal security. It was a thing. So my boss came in to check on me and I was like a mess. So he comes in and sits down, like shuts the door and he's like, hey, so have you ever had a panic attack? And I was like hyperventilating in a paper bag? No, like I've never had a panic attack. He's like, well, that's like not what all panic attacks look like. So he explained what panic attacks look like, what they could be. And I was like, oh, those are panic attacks? I'm like, yeah, that's like all day, every day, like of my life. Like those are panic attacks. And he's like, right. So this is the language for you to go and talk to your mental health professional. Because I'd been to therapists and I had talked about my anxiety, but they're like, oh, you're just a high achiever. Oh, you're in law school. Oh, you're a lawyer. It's just normal anxiety. So my boss was able to give me the words, the language to explain what was going on with me. And sure enough, a raging underlying case of generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder. And so I think like imagine the impact of doing that to someone who has ADHD and doesn't know it, because that diagnosis and treatment for anxiety changed my life. And that was 15 years ago. And my God, if only even like my psychiatrist wasn't thinking about the comorbidity of anxiety and ADHD, I could have gotten diagnosed way, way earlier. So, in the same way that we have been working so hard and continue to work to destigmatize anxiety, depression, and other mental health conditions in the legal profession, we've got to include ADHD in that discussion because it's both a disability and a mental health condition. So, the fact that it's just draped and like soaking with stigma makes so many people who know they have ADHD just afraid to even talk about it because they're worried that it's going to be dismissed or possibly even weaponized against them. And that's why I think about ADHD as a secret weapon for lawyers. So we've talked about a little bit about the secrecy, why it's there and why we need to not be so secret. But I think of it as a weapon because we can certainly use it as a weapon. It helps us to win battles every day. And when certain conditions are right, we can win wars. But, there's the plus and the minuses of our ADHD. So in classic ADHD commuted fashion, sometimes our ADHD weapon backfires on us. It happens. But what's the worst part, and this is one of the hardest parts of my job as being a lawyer career coach, is hearing how employers can weaponize our ADHD against us. And not always knowingly. I do know people who have come up, people were asking this, people who have disclosed their ADHD and it was used against them and they were eventually like, they either quit or were fired. So, but a lot of them don't realize they're weaponizing ADHD against us. But it's super heartbreaking when I hear about it because I can relate to it. And also because I know that high achievers with ADHD are well suited to be successful lawyers. There's a reason why we flock to it. We're good at it. So where this comes up very commonly is in the area of billable hours. And I just want to say, my experience with billable hours is different than most people's because I didn't have a problem entering my time. I think I gamified it somehow for myself, but it was still an issue. So the feedback that I got, especially at my second law firm, was like, it looks like you're busy. Every time I see you, you're busy. You have enough work. The clients are happy. You're turning things in on time. Everybody likes you, but your hours, like you don't have enough hours. And so there were two things that were happening for me. When the conditions were right and like dopamine was available to me, I could churn out quality work product, no problem. But here was like the little rub. Sometimes I'd get into hyper focus and I could do it super fast. Like not only faster than other people, but faster than myself sometimes, which is confusing. So that efficiency is penalized rather than rewarded on a billable hour system. That's part of it. But the bigger part of it was like my inability, to initiate tasks when the dopamine wasn't there for me. So when conditions were off, I would spin my wheels and like force myself. I'd just try and try. Like I'd have all the work in front of me. So yes, I looked busy because I'm like sitting there, like, with highlighters and pen and just like, let's do it. Like, let's go. And so I wasn't going to build a client for that. I couldn't build a client for that. So that's what was going on. And like, I didn't know that that's what was going on. They didn't know what was going on. Plus, everybody experiences this to some degree at some point, right? And so that adds this extra layer of confusion because our supervisors and people, neurotypical people, are like, well, yeah, that happens to me too. Like, yeah, ideally conditions would be right and I could just do the work that I want to do. But then I just make myself do it. And it's like, so it's very confusing. Like, how come you can't do it when everyone else can? It's like, yeah, seriously, why? Why do I suck? Why is there something wrong with me, right? But the difference is neurotypical brains generate dopamine when something's important and has to get done. ADHD brains don't do that. So instead we think, like I saw a comment from Sarah, like it's a moral failing and we're deemed like morally bad and wrong and horrible lawyers. And oh my God, everyone's going to find out that we're bad and we're going to get fired. I'm sure this sounds familiar to some of us. So, and then as I mentioned before, it can backfire on us sometimes, right? Like there are these conditions that I keep alluding to for when the conditions are right. It's there are four main ones, and they're interest, when something is interesting, challenging, novel, or urgent. So if it's interesting, we can do it, and that hyper focus might kick in. But if it's applied to something that's not important, it's just a rabbit hole of lost time. Oops. And if something's challenging, like a lot of us will take jobs because it's a challenge, or take on decide to do something because it's a challenge, but that can backfire because once we master the challenge, which inevitably we will master it because we love a challenge, then we're like, boring, done, move on, find a new job, find a new project, whatever. Same goes with novelty. Like if something's new, it also tends to be interesting and challenging, but when the newness wears off, we're done. Can't get the dopamine anymore. And then urgency. It looks like we're procrastinating because we need to have more immediate deadlines. And this is something that I know DeWall was talking about. We need more structure. So just shorter deadlines. Like it seems counterintuitive, but like for testing, don't give my kid more time to do a test. Break it up into smaller deadlines. That's going to work because we're just going to fritter away that extra time. We literally cannot make ourselves do the work. But, last but not least, ADHD is our secret weapon. Like I said, it helps us to win everyday battles, and we can win wars when we are supported and the conditions are there to support us. And I even have an example of this. Like at my first job, when I was representing lenders and closing loans, there was a deal to finance the construction of a pirate ship. What? Okay, so the four conditions, right? Interesting. I said pirate ship. Who here is not interested? Number two, It was a challenge. This deal had been passed around my law firm to every lawyer above who was senior to me, every single one. No one wanted it. No one was interested in it. No one could do it. And they were just trying to pass it around. So I was like, oh, that sounds like a challenge. I accept. It was novel, obviously, pirate ship, but I did have some experience with financing ships. I had done some like these big tugboat things like in the Virgin Islands and stuff. So it wasn't completely new, but it was like new enough. I mean, 'cause pirate ship, pirate ship. And it was urgent because the bank was ready, the lender was ready, and no one at our firm was ready. So I was like, crap, got to get this thing going. And that was those four conditions were met. And it was just the right combination to keep me going, keep me engaged for over a year. Because that's how long it took to document and close that loan. But when you're dealing with construction and all, lending, there's all these little deadlines and you have to get permits and you have, all these things need to be met in a certain order and everyone's moving quick, trying to move as quickly as possible. It worked. Closed it, amazing. It's still in business, taking people out on tours for a pirate ship. So just think, like if I or my supervisors had known that I had ADHD, we could have worked together to find the right mix of projects that could keep me engaged. Because instead, I got bored after a couple of years. I mastered that, even though I had no experience going into that job. And the first time a headhunter came to me and was like, "Do you want a lateral to a boutique real estate firm?" I was like, "Sold," because I'm bored. Maybe we could have kept me there. I don't know. So that's the ultimate goal. I want like employee, managers, lawyers, paralegals, so everybody in the legal profession, like let's have some more awareness around ADHD, but and be able to recognize it and see how it shows up so that we can support each other because we annoy ourselves. We annoy the people we work with. It's confusing. So I see us headed that way. But what needs to happen is we need to disarm the powers that be. We need to take our ADHD and not allow people to weaponize it against us anymore. And that really is by bridging that knowledge gap. And I actually have a great example of this happening, not from top down, but from bottom up, where I had somebody reply to one of my ADHD newsletters during October, where I was talking about lawyers and ADHD. And this person in Big Law is a senior associate. And they said, I've been working for an ADHD partner for years, and I figured out how to work with him and how to work with his brain. And he is just so appreciative. He says he couldn't do what he does without me. Like our practice group has been so successful. He got me this huge raise. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was like almost crying. And I was so, I was like, this is amazing. And she said, she said, I really want to thank you for your emails because they have given me the words. They have given me the language to explain to other people on our team how to work with him, because the paralegals and the assistants and some of the other associates, like, well, I told him this, so he knows. And I'm able to say, well, this is why that's not going to work for him. What works with me and you, it doesn't work with him. And it's not because he's too good for us or something else. It's because his brain works differently. And so I just felt like, oh my gosh, it's like when my boss gave me the words and the language to describe my anxiety, I gave this associate words to help her describe the partner's ADHD to everyone else so that they can all work together. And so that's what I'm hoping is possible. That's what I see as being possible, but more from the top down. Because just think about it. This associate, really the only thing that she had to incentivize her was making her life easier, right? Less frustrating. There was no guarantee that she was going to get like a raise out of it, right? But that's what I see. That's my hope for the future of ADHD in the legal profession. And I'm one of those people that believes that when we know better, we do better. So today, I think we're going to learn a whole lot more. And I think we can do a whole lot better.
Amazing. Thanks so much for kicking it off that way, Annie. That was fantastic. And I was taking notes as I do on all these things because I don't have good working memory like most of us. And therefore, I write everything down. And what I've actually found hilarious over the last couple of years is I basically do entirely virtual calls. I have amazing notes on stuff. And I don't know if you have this experience, Annie. Other people will take notes on the same call I'm on. I'm like, your notes are useless. Like it's great that those work for your brain, but like, wow, I need a whole lot more information than that. But if I've got my notes, I will remember everything. Like it all floods back. But your notes, I had so many good ideas and you wrote them down. And like, I don't know if you have that experience, but even just note taking, understanding that part of the process, like bridging some of those gaps. If I've got the right little hints for me, I'm great. But if you give me garbage back, all those good ideas I had, they're gone forever.
Well, right. And what's interesting is that I actually have a comorbidity of auditory processing. So my note taking kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So I take notes, but then I need to like verify that like that I would need that accommodation. I need instructions in writing. And if you want to give them to me verbally, fine, but I want to put them into an email and you need to sign off on them. They did not accommodate that. There were a lot of misunderstandings.
Yeah, and I think, to your point, and you mentioned so many times in the talk about these misunderstandings because people at their core just don't understand what you're dealing with. When I first told my wife that I had ADHD, like when I first realized I had ADHD, even though I had been diagnosed many times before, but I didn't understand what it meant, sort of like you, and you obviously start seeing all these connections. Like she would get annoyed at like how many timers would go off on my phone, like how many alarms I had set. I'm like, look, you have two choices. I don't remember to do things, or a noise goes off. Like you choose one of those two options. You do not get the third option, which is to remember these things.
Right.
Like if you want me to do this in 5 minutes, there will be an alarm set. I will not do it otherwise, and it's not me deliberately not doing it. It's just I'm not gonna remember.
It will absolutely slip my mind, even if it's something I want to do. Like it's for me only. I can still forget it.
Yeah, it's just I think this education piece is going to be so key, and I think like you said, to not allow people to weaponize ADHD against us anymore, and by doing that, by bridging that knowledge gap, and then by giving people the tools and the language, and like you said with that colleague, or that the description you were giving of someone you coached, I guess, who had a colleague and managed up. It is amazing where you start realizing, okay, like this is all this person needs. They don't have the words because they don't understand. They don't know they have ADHD or they don't understand their own condition. That's not their fault necessarily. Again, so much of the medical profession barely understands this. But once you start
Yeah.
realizing what they need, it's actually they're consistent. It's very easy to say like, oh wow, this isn't
It's
that hard.
very little, like little accommodations. And when I'm talking to people about this, I'm like, honestly, these are accommodations that could just be good for everyone in the
Exactly.
workplace. Like everybody has little, because I saw some comments where people were like, well, I don't have ADHD, but I relate to some of this. I'm like, I know. And that's part of like the double-edged sword is like people can relate, but then they're also like, yeah, but here's how I get out of it. It's like, I know, but I can't do that.
Yeah, and I
My
think
brain
also
can't
anyone who
do
has
that.
kids, if your kid has been diagnosed with ADHD, this stuff is all genetics. So, I think in some cases we
Yes.
actually had a colleague of mine where he's like, "Oh, my kid's being diagnosed with this," and I was like, "Well, that's such a good segue into this conversation about how like you was just saying," and I just
Right.
phrased a couple things. I didn't use the word ADHD. I was like, "Well, like do you ever feel like this or like this?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, and so actually he is going through the diagnosis himself, and I think for him it's been this amazing process where again it's that balance of like, do I say something? Do I not? And how do I do this, even as someone who understands it in a way where it's going to be perceived positively? But to me, it's more like I think I've got the answers for you on some of these things, and more importantly, I know how to manage you better now because I know what you need that you don't always realize you need, but I know I need it, and I see you needing it, and I see how well you do with those urgent deadlines and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited for where we're heading because this profession is so far behind in all of these areas. But Annie, thank you so much for an amazing talk to kick things off. And if you take a look at the comments, you will see all sorts of positive praise, well deserved, coming your way.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Annie. All right, I'm going to share my screen again here. So let me just load that up. Okay, so we're going to move to the activity phase next. It's going to be a little hard to read. There's lots of words, but what we always want to do at the summit is not just have a bunch of talks. The talks are great, but we also want to start nudging some action. So we're doing ADHD, and that means we need multiple options here at the end of the day. So I created lots of options, which makes this hard to read. So option bucket number one, we'll call it, share one thing. If you've got ADHD and you're comfortable talking about it, share something that's been a challenge to you as a member of the profession with ADHD. Toss it on LinkedIn or Twitter or some other platform. Tag me, tag the summit. So here's an example of a way you could seed that. So here's what I wish people knew about ADHD in the legal profession, and then you share whatever that is. That might be too much for some of you. Don't want to do it publicly, worried for reasonable reasons. Write a letter to yourself about some of the challenges you face. Like just give yourself some credit for some of the difficulties you've had in a profession that is not hospitable to this. If you don't have ADHD, this is probably a terrible option for you then, because I don't know what you're going to do. So another option is share that you're an ally. So again, you could post publicly. Or if that's too much for you, spend the next 5-6 minutes doing a little research. Yeah, like right now on ADHD, or like write yourself a letter about how you can be a better ally to neurodiverse members of the profession next year. So I'm going to leave this up. Choose one of those options or really one of those sub options within, and take the next 5-6 minutes to do that. I'm going to play a little music in the background. But I'd love to see everyone taking some kind of action, at least right now, in one of these buckets.
Be a good day. Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day.
And in the comments, let us know which one you're choosing. And if you post, feel free to link to it on Twitter or LinkedIn so everyone can see that post once it's done.
Step 1, wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up. Today's gonna be a good day. 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 Yo, set your affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food, good mood, blood in circulation. One step at a time, yeah, that's how you make it. Set a goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to pick one thought, have some concentration. And if I make a mistake, it's called education. I try to do this every day, call it replication. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 So life ain't easy, yo, I think there's a reason though. Ups and downs, just like every different season, yo. Sometimes I'm high, other times I'm barely breathing, though. I always gotta fight and hide from the demons, yo. Negative thoughts are poison, they rot. Head full of flies, so here come the clouds. They'll never stop unless I can swap all the bad for the good in my head when I'm lost. Yeah, so I'ma fake it till I make it. Positive thoughts are overtaken, I got patience. One day at a time is how you operate a cadence. A flow, you grow, you show yourself a foundation. Stay away from all the shit that causes temptation. I know that I like to do it cause it's sensation. I live my life in my head like a narration. Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Wake up early, gonna rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Keep those comments coming. Let us know what you're working on. Of course, you are welcome to keep writing that post and then get back to us after. But I hope this is helpful, whether you're doing research, writing a letter to yourself, or putting something out there publicly and being brave and vulnerable in that case. Looking forward to seeing more of these. Keep us posted and keep working on them.
Today's gonna be a good day. Wake up. 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 Today's gonna be a good day. Yo, set your affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food, good mood, blood in circulation. One step at a time, yeah, that's how you make it. Set a goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to pick one thought, have some concentration. And if I make a mistake, it's called education. I try to do this every day, call it replication. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 So life ain't easy, yo, I think there's a reason though. Ups and downs, just like every different season, yo. Sometimes I'm high, other times I'm barely breathing, though. I always gotta fight and hide from the demons, yo. Negative thoughts are poison, they rot. Head full of flaws, so here come the clouds. They'll never stop unless I can swap all the bad for the good in my head when I'm lost. Yeah, so I'ma fake it till I make it. Positive thoughts are overtaken, I got patience. One day at a time is how you operate a cadence. A flow, you grow, you show yourself a foundation. Stay away from all the shit that causes temptation. I know that I like to do it cause it's sensation. I live my life in my head like a narration. Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Wake up early, gon' rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing. Step 1, wake up early, gon' rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, think real hard about what you wanna be. Step 4.
I see a couple posts already on LinkedIn tagging me. If you are one of those posters, feel free to link them in the chat here so people can see them and help support your post and increase the reach of that post as we share these messages.
Set your affirmations, aspirations. I got shit to do, the aftermath of preparation. Good food, good mood, blood in circulation. One step at a time, yeah, that's how you make it. Set a goal you control and the steps you take them. I try to pick one thought, have some concentration. And if I make a mistake, it's called education. I try to do this every day, call it replication. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 So life ain't easy, yo. I think there's a reason though.
Interesting that the RSD stuff is coming up, given it is a, I'll call it somewhat controversial topic as I understand it. I am a full believer in it, to be clear, and I'm very excited to see what Owen is going to be talking about later. Justin in the comments also talking about the combo of ADHD, autism plus ADHD. We will be featuring autism at next year's summit. There is massive comorbidity with autism and ADHD, and sometimes also people with ADHD, when they are medicated for it, that is when they discover they actually, in fact, have autism, which presents a whole other fun set of challenges. All that to say, there is so much, I think, for all of us to learn, and especially for those of you like Justin and myself who are later diagnosed. That stuff is the added fun of also understanding what your life was like, how you were treated, and really diving into these kind of conditions. So feel free in the comments to add things in. Again, if you're posting on LinkedIn, you can check out the hashtag Authentic Lawyer Summit if you want to do a little search there. You will see a number of posts that people have been adding, and feel free to comment, like, it's going to help boost them and help get the message out there. In the meantime, quickly, and thanks so much, Kaylee, there in the chat, who I know you've posted as well. Whoops. I want to move quickly to our CPD thing. So Amar in the background, if you can just add in the link to this page here into the comments. At least in Canada, this is CPD eligible. And I want to make sure that everyone who is able to, who needs CPD credit, can get access to it. So the code we're going to use is executive function. There is one code per topic. So you'll see the code will be executive function, and that will help us keep track on who is here. So we'll get that link added to the chat shortly. There we go. It is now up there. So if you need to, or you're eligible for CPD, just make sure you fill that form. Again, the code is going to be executive function. We're going to move into the next talk in a minute or two. But in the meantime, go ahead, finish that letter, like those, and comment on those posts on LinkedIn. Fill out that CPD form, do some ADHD-style multitasking, and we'll be back in a minute or two. I am setting a timer because I won't remember, because I can't track time. But we'll be back in a minute or two with Emily for a fantastic talk coming up shortly.
think there's a reason though. Ups and downs, just like every different season, yo. Sometimes I'm high, other times I'm barely breathing though. I always gotta fight and hide from the demons, yo. Negative thoughts are poison, they rot. Head full of flies, so here come the clouds. They'll never stop unless I can swap all the bad for the good in my head when I'm lost. Yeah, so I'ma fake it till I make it. Positive thoughts are overtaken, I got patience. One day at a time is how you operate a cadence. A flow, you grow, you show yourself a foundation. Stay away from all the shit that causes temptation. I know that I like to do it cause of sensation. I live my life in my head like a narration. Don't expect greatness, do my best, man, I'll take it. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.
Wake up, really gon' rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, you grow hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing. Step 1, wake up, really gon' rise with the sun. Step 2, get some good, some food in you. Step 3, you grow hard about what you wanna be. Step 4, everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have Emily Weldon. She is an attorney turned coach who works with lawyers with ADHD. Seems like a great person to have here, given what we're talking about. She enjoys working with attorneys at all levels of their career to figure out what makes them tick and find ways to work with their ADHD, not against it. Today, Emily is going to be talking all about why white-knuckling your ADHD isn't working and how coaching can help. Emily, I can't wait, so you can unmute yourself, and I'm getting out of here. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Well, thank you all for joining me today. As Erin said, my name is Emily Weldon, and I'm going to be talking today about ADHD coaching specifically and how it can help in the practice of law. As a bit of background, I am an ADHD coach with Dixon Life Coaching, and we work with lawyers with ADHD. We have group coaching, we host CLEs, and we present at conferences, but we also work with individuals. So I want to start by telling you all the story of Jesse. Jesse was a client of mine a few years ago, and he's a partner at a really big firm here in the US, like one of the big ones. Jesse is what his colleagues refer to as a master of motions. He is incredibly well respected and sought after for writing and arguing substantive and dispositive motions. He's highly creative and persuasive. He sees connections that others miss, and for these reasons, he's one of the most successful motions writers, probably in his jurisdiction. I don't want to say which jurisdiction it is in case that gives you enough clues to figure out who Jesse actually is, because Jesse is not his real name, spoiler alert. But Jesse came to me for ADHD coaching shortly after getting diagnosed as an adult. And a few months into us working together, he arrived at his session. He was super stressed out because he had, my dog decided to just interrupt my talk and make me lose my train of thought. Okay, so he came to the session and he was super, super stressed. He had a big upcoming hearing on some motions. So there were 3 different motions that were scheduled for oral argument on the same day. They weren't consolidated cases, but they were all related. And he had some really serious concerns about this. He was worried about keeping the details of each case separate. He was concerned about remembering which arguments had been made in which cases and which had been excluded previously. He had previous experience working on and preparing for cases like this, but his solution in the past was to just stay up for 24 hours in advance of the hearing, work crazy long hours in the weeks leading up to these hearings. He would be super stressed and almost frantic over the preparation. He said that the anticipatory anxiety was so intense, it was almost paralyzing until the hearing finally happened. Then, after these hearings, he would be feeling okay sometimes, but usually he was just really unsatisfied with his performance. He felt like he could do better, and the stress and disruption was getting in the way. So this would result in a shame spiral, and he would then curl into a ball of emotion and stop doing anything for the rest of the week, just straight up ADHD paralysis. So he came to this session, and not only was he feeling super stressed, but he also felt like there was nothing that he could do differently this time in his preparations. He felt like he couldn't figure out what would be actionable, and that even if we did come up with something, he probably wouldn't be able to follow through on it. He didn't trust himself. Is this sounding familiar to anyone? Because it certainly sounded really familiar to me before I got diagnosed with ADHD. So before I go on, I want to pause quickly and answer the question that I'm sure you're all thinking. Emily, what the fuck is an ADHD coach? So that's certainly what I thought when I first heard the term from my psychiatrist when I was diagnosed at 31. Well, an ADHD coach is a life coach with specific knowledge, training, or expertise in ADHD. As an ADHD coach, I help my clients explore the ways that ADHD is getting in their way, and we collaborate to find solutions that might work for them. Coaching will not make you neurotypical or help you mask more effectively, but it might help you discover new ways to understand and approach a problem and help you define action steps that you can actually follow through on. Coaching is not therapy. It's very different, although sometimes people get it confused. But many of my clients do find that there are unique benefits to therapy that they don't get in coaching, and the reverse is also true. There are benefits to coaching that they don't get in therapy. So, how did I help Jesse? What did we do that day in that first session about this case? And what ultimately happened? Well, first off, I asked him if he would be open to exploring this more. Coaching is really big about finding what you want to work on and engaging with permission. So we don't force you to engage with something that you're not ready to engage in. I wanted to know if maybe he was open to thinking about this problem in a new way. And he was. So we dug in. We really thought deeply about what had worked before and what hadn't worked before. Together, we identified the ways that he was coping through ADHD symptoms, which he was really not fully aware of because he had such a new diagnosis, and he was coping without any effective strategies. And we identified that some of those coping mechanisms were helpful, but some were really not self-supportive, like staying up all night. We looked at what needed to change and how it needed to change. And then we thought about breaking out the steps. What exactly needed to happen before the hearings for him to be ready? When did it need to happen by? Who could support him? And how was this going to happen? Not how is this going to happen like, oh, this is what I need to do, but really fleshing out the details like, when am I going to work on this specific task? How am I going to hold myself accountable and remind myself that this is what I need to be working on without shaming myself? How could he make this information usable on the day of? Because there were so many swirling details, he was worried that he couldn't keep things straight. Working memory can be a really difficult challenge for people with ADHD, and it was for him. So we designed a specific strategy for that issue. And so as we thought through these various solutions, we iterated on it and we spent the next session working on it. And then finally the hearing came. We had a session scheduled for the day after. Before our scheduled time, I was feeling a little bit hesitant to ask him about it. Because what if it had gone badly, right? You know, as attorneys, we can prepare, and the judge can still rule against you. So I wanted to be mindful of that risk. So as he joined his session, I work exclusively on video calls. So as he joined his session, I cautiously asked, "How did your hearing go?" And he beamed with like smile from ear to ear. I mean, truly, he is a very circumspect and quiet person, very understated in his emotional expression. And he just lit up with joy because not only did the hearings go amazingly well in all of his cases, he felt prepared. Even better, he hadn't stayed up until 3 in the morning the night before, and he had been able to activate successfully on his strategies and prepare ahead of time. Something that he said during that session really stuck out to me, and that is that he said, I felt the most prepared out of any hearing I've ever prepared for. And yet I still had the least amount of stress during this whole process. And not only did he have less stress during this process, everyone else around him did too. Jesse confided that a colleague complimented him by saying, "You seemed so on the ball with this argument. And it was just such a joy to watch you work at your fullest potential." Wow, what amazing feedback from that colleague. So Jesse was able to work through this problem. He was able to find the ways in which ADHD was getting in his way, in the way of what was really, truly an incredible legal mind. And he was able to remove those barriers through coaching. And then when you look at all of the when you take all those barriers away, you got to see him fully shining. That's the real power of coaching. And that is why I love what I do. Okay, so I'm going to quickly check in the chat, see if there are any questions. Or, Aaron, I think I'm on time.
You did great there. Feel free to keep the questions coming in the chat. Also, we've added in a link. Someone asked about CPD, so we've added in a link here. I'll just start up there. So it's all on our website. It's amazing as you were talking. One of the things that really stood out to me, you said fleshing out the details and figuring out how to hold yourself accountable and do the right stuff without shaming yourself. And it's that last part I think is so challenging, right? Like, we know in many cases we're not good at this. We want to be good at it. And even sometimes with the plan, we still won't do it. I'm about to pay the ADHD tax later today on something I shouldn't say stupidly, I've been putting off for no real valid reason other than I don't quite know how to do it. It will literally take me 10 minutes to do. I have snoozed the alarm every freaking day, multiple times a day, for the past 2 weeks. And I might actually hit the expiry date where I'm now going to be ineligible and it will cost me real money, hence the ADHD tax, for no reason other than pure ADHD-led procrastination. It's like, I know I need to do it. I know I want to do it. At some point you say, like, you have the time to do it. Like, clearly could have fit it in. At some point in the last 2 weeks, still haven't done it. And what I find interesting on the accountability piece, at least for me, is clients do a good job keeping me accountable, because if they're unhappy, they're following up with me. That's good. I need that kind of thing. But when it comes to myself and things that I sort of want to do, but don't have to do, finding that accountability buddy or some mechanism to have real accountability, which I know for a lot of us needs to be external, is key. And I'm curious, Emily, just quickly what you see with people. Do they find, whether it's like bodily doubling or some other way, like external accountability tends to be some kind of good solution, or what do you find tends to work for a lot of your clients?
So I'm actually speaking about this exact thing at the big ADHD conference later this month. How do we encourage ourselves to activate and build motivation by using the things that are inherent to ADHD? And I won't dive into the full details because we set aside an hour talk for that, and I could talk for days on how to activate around ADHD. But the key thing is to remember that other people provide accountability. Your own self-accountability, those are really working memory supports. And if you can think about things as, I forgot to do this, as opposed to, I haven't done this, right? If you can frame it in a way that the symptom is at the forefront, it can really destigmatize that shame, right? Because then it's not a failing of you, then it's ADHD getting in the way. So I have a really great, do I have a good example of this? Yes. So when I was a practicing attorney, spoiler alert, I worked as an attorney for 6 years, folks. I don't think I said that. But when I was an attorney, I was the messy desk lady. I had piles and papers. I mean, who am I kidding? I'm still the messy desk lady.
Organized but messy to the outside observer, right?
Yes, and I've zoomed so far in so that I didn't have to clean my desk before you all came, so you can't see it. But I didn't want to be the messy desk lady. And so what I did was I was working with my own coach at the time, and I devised the strategy to go into the office on a weekend. And in order to get myself to go there, I scheduled lunch with my best friend who happens to live around the corner. So I was going into the office in the morning, cleaning, entering my time, because that was always also a struggle. And I had all of these really fun strategies to make it fun, make a game out of it. But even if I was late, I was still going to meet up with my friend for lunch. And that got me there. It was enough accountability that it helped me activate even when I was going to be doing something that I really did not want to be doing and hate doing.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And as you were talking about docketing, that's the second time. And Owen, who will be our next speaker, was nodding in the background. People can't see him. Docketing is definitely a struggle for most people with ADHD. It's a struggle for most lawyers to do, but it is a different struggle for people with ADHD. Emily, I wish we had more time. Thank you so much for joining, and feel free to add a link to the chat. I know a lot of people might be interested in coaches and how that works. I don't know if you may not have access if you're streaming live to LinkedIn, but in any event, we'll be letting people know lots more about some of the work you do, because coaching for ADHD, I think, is a pretty new concept. So Emily, thank you so much for joining today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, next up is Owen McGran. So Owen is an entrepreneur and attorney, owns 2 law firms, sits on the board of over 10 companies. He is writing a novel. He has recently launched a podcast, and yes, you just heard those words. He very clearly has ADHD, and those are his words, not mine. But I mean, that description sounds like ADHD if I've ever heard it before. Today, Owen's going to be talking about playing to your ever proliferating strengths. Owen, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. So I thought rather than jump into a bunch of specifically law-related stories, it might help to pull back and talk about some of these things in different contexts. It's easy to get locked into legal stories and get caught in the legal aspect and not pull out the ADHD bit. So a bit of a story that I suspect anybody with ADHD will recognize at least parts of. When I was a sophomore in college, I took English 220, which was early British literature. Um, the syllabus had all of the typical things. We started with Beowulf. The professor was a little frisky, so we went directly to Grendel by John Gardner afterwards to get the monster side of the story. We then proceeded to Canterbury Tales, which I found 4 years after reading it as a sophomore in high school. The Wife of Bath Tale was not nearly as interesting, and the Miller and the Reeves tales were far more entertaining. At the very end of the course, we finished up with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which to this day happens to be one of my very, very favorite pieces of writing. That year, actually the last 3 years in college, the school that I went to, you could reserve a desk in the library that only you could use. I managed to find a desk in the basement of the library, hidden away that you really could not find unless you knew where it was. A bunch of my friends knew that I had that desk, and they would still wander around for a half hour, 45 minutes trying to find me. I managed to smuggle in a mini fridge and a Foreman grill, and I basically lived there except for when I was sleeping. And it was a Tuesday afternoon, and I sat down to read Gawain. I read it through. It's not super long, and I read it through again because it just floored me. It's a phenomenal work about how messed up human beings are. I promised my wife that I wouldn't swear, so I'm trying to hold that in. And after going through it that second time, I got up and I walked to the portion of the library where all of the early and Middle English literature was, and I found a copy of Gawain in the original Middle English. So I picked it off the shelf and I walked back to my little study hovel and I opened it up. This was probably about 4:30 or 5 p.m. at that point. I next realized that I had to do something when my alarm went off for me to go to my 8 a.m. class. I had spent that entire evening and night learning Middle English because it seemed really fun and interesting, and I wanted to read this amazing piece of literature in its original form. So I went off to class, and a week later, the final paper for that class was due. It was a 3,000 word paper on any of the works that we read or combination, choose your own adventure kind of thing. So I wrote this paper, and I'm typically extremely hard on myself as far as writing goes. I don't think that anything I write is up to my own standard, but I finished this paper and I felt really good about it. And I turned it into the professor, and a week later, we all got our papers back. And I saw all of my classmates getting papers that were marked up with comments, and I finally got mine, and there were no comments on it. There was simply a red F circled. And my heart just fell out of me. It was absolutely brutal. And I was very confused. I mentioned that, talk a little bit about RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. I had an acute period of that right then. The next day, Professor Brown had office hours. So I went in and I said, "What the hell happened? This is a good paper." And she said, "You didn't do the assignment." I said, what are you talking about? This is a 3,500 word paper about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I think it's a good paper. And she said, 80% of it's in Middle English. That wasn't the assignment. And I thought, oh, okay. And there wasn't really any arguing with her. So I got up and I went down the hall to the chair of the department's office, who's still a good friend of mine. I was actually on the phone with him this weekend. I said, "Hood, what is this?" And she said, and Professor Hood said, "Sylvia can't read Middle English, Owen." So I'm going to just let that sit for a second, because there's all kinds of layers of ADHD stuff going on in that story. And the thing in hindsight about this is there are two ways that you can respond to an event like that, right? You can internalize it and think, "Man, I really messed that up. I don't know what I was thinking. This was terrible. I need to do better." There's another part of you that can say, "Screw this lady. She doesn't know. She has a PhD in early British literature. She can't read Middle English. That's her problem, not mine." And it turns out that neither one of those responses is particularly helpful. So I want to step back and pull out a statistic that just absolutely threw me on the floor the first time I read it, because it felt so real to me. Children with ADHD are provided negative feedback approximately 10,000 times more 10,000 more times in childhood than neurotypical children. Think about that percussive aspect of being given, just sit down and focus, just try harder. Why can't you just turn in your homework on time? Over and over and over again. And what this often does is it creates a sort of doom loop in us, where we are constantly trying to mask our ADHD behaviors, the way that we work, the way that we interact with people. And my friends, that is a losing battle. If you are constantly trying to be something that you're not, you are always going to fail. And so one of the things that was an absolute breakthrough for me, and one that I wish for everybody here with ADHD, is to realize that there's this other side of it where I was able to learn Middle English in a night and then write a paper in it. These are things that most normal people don't do. Now, this could show up in terms of going through 10,000 pages of e-discovery so that you know exactly how to try a medical malpractice case. You know what the critical information is. It would take other people weeks to get through that. ADHD provides an ability to see connections between and among things that most people who think more linearly aren't going to get. So rather than focus on all the things that you've been told your entire life that just isn't right, that you're not doing it properly, can't you just focus a little bit more? Imagine telling a paraplegic, well, why don't you just try harder to walk? The thing that ultimately is going to get you over that edge into a happy, productive, feel good about yourself place is finding a way to scaffold your executive function issues, right? So that you can focus on the things that you are just immeasurably good at. So, I don't know whether this is a inspirational speech. I don't know whether this is me just rambling. But I really want to encourage you to set aside that long history of being told, maybe you're not so good at all of these things, and realize that, you know, you're really fucking good at all this other stuff. So with that, thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I thought you promised your wife no swearing, but I like
I
how you
know.
ended it that way. I make the
got-
rules
I
here,
got
so swearing
all
is
the way there,
encouraged and
all the way
permitted.
there.
So, no, that was fantastic, Owen, and thank you so much for sharing that story. It brought me back to, I think we did some of this Chaucer stuff in grade 12, and bringing back memories of reading all these books you were
Mhm.
describing. But I think so many times too, for myself, and I know from the chat, and you'll see more, so many other people later resonating with your story of just doing it a bit differently, still doing it, and not getting criticized for actually doing. It sort of sounds like a much better job than everybody in
Yeah, no
reality. And to your point, I mean, I didn't know that stat, but I think you said kids with ADHD get 10,000 times more negative feedback in childhood than neurotypical kids. That doesn't surprise me, like that, but that scale is staggering. And I
Yeah.
know for myself personally that was true, maybe not 10,000 times more, but certainly a whole lot more. And I know for so many people here, that level of, and I think Annie in the chat said, like, no wonder that negative internal voice, that feedback
That's
loop,
right.
because you've gone it
Right.
your whole life and you've blamed yourself. And how do we not internalize that? And I think, again, for many people who discover as adults they have ADHD, it's like that holy shit moment of like, oh wow, all that stuff I was told by others, and then I told myself, and now I believe. Oh, it turns out there was another explanation. And I know for some people that's actually a huge challenge, because on the one hand, it seems like it should be the kind of thing that is a relief, but on the other hand, you now have to contend with, holy crap, all these other people blame me for something
Mhm.
that wasn't my fault. Should they have known? Should they have not known? And unfortunately, I think there's just a lack of education, and times have also changed. And hopefully, at least we can stop some of this stuff, because it's just not right. It's not good, and all of that stuff. So, Owen, thank you so much for joining today and sharing your story. That was fantastic.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, next up we've got Sarah Enor, and I'm gonna, Sarah, invite your bingo card up on the screen in a moment here. So Sarah is a speaker on a mission to bring simple inclusion strategies to life by sharing her personal story, which is great because we love sharing personal stories. That's what we're doing today. She was diagnosed, like many of us, with ADHD as an adult and is slowly getting reacquainted with herself. She knows self-awareness, and curating her environment lets her shine authentically. Like many of us, she is a lawyer. She spent many years working in-house and in a sole practice, and actually remains a lawyer on the side. Today, she's going to be talking about fit and flourish. Sarah, take it away.
Thanks. Thanks, Aaron. I'll just actually do this share myself oh, you got it. Perfect. So I love that Owen actually just looked back at an example that was outside of the law, and I plan to do a similar thing, actually. I think that I'd like to do a little library story time, if that's okay. And the purpose of it, in part, is to actually help us understand what symptoms of ADHD are. We've seen some of them in the legal context. We've heard Owen's. And hopefully you'll identify some of these ones here in this beautiful little bingo card. I don't know, Aaron, if you can drop it in the chat too, if people need a bigger version. But it's not mandatory. There is absolutely no prize, and the instructions are written on it. It might help some of you stay a little more focused as the story goes on. So if you don't want to, we'll sit back and listen to my story. I mean, this one here looks interesting. The back of the book says that it's a tale of one woman's epic yet outwardly unremarkable journey. We'll follow little Sarah as she moves through life, school, and work, unknowingly gathering important information for a major battle. When a shocking diagnosis changes everything, Sarah is forced to reckon with her past so she can chart a satisfying future. Which version of Sarah will prevail? Will she choose to fit in or find her own way to flourish? Shall we? Once upon a time, there was a funny little girl named Sarah, with an H. She liked to delight her family by singing and dancing around her house. When she was supposed to be sleeping, she would invent stories and sing songs out loud instead. She was big on snuggles, on talking, on playing. In fact, she was big on everything. Sarah's family their energy didn't always match her own. And each day, Sarah knew there was a time for fun and exuberance and that there was a time to stop it. In grade school, Sarah felt nervous and shy. Teachers praised her for being well behaved, and she got along with most of the other kids. But some kids weren't so nice to her. Those ones might push her in a snowbank when the teacher wasn't watching. In high school, she discovered team sports, which she really loved and was great at them all. She loved being social and active. She was late to school most days, and so the high school principal suggested to her parents that they buy her an alarm clock. She found calculus really boring and therefore tough. But since she's always been so well behaved, she thought she deserved to live a little. So she skipped a few classes and talked through others, and she was surprised to barely pass the class. One day, a friend of hers asked her how her university applications were going. She hadn't even turned her mind to it, but she sprang into action to meet the deadline that was just 3 short days away. She applied to computer science programs because she'd enjoyed a coding class that she'd taken earlier that term. But the rejection letters began rolling in because of her calculus grade. So Sarah majored in history instead. Afterwards, she applied to law school because what was she going to do with a history degree, she thought. And she liked to debate, so she thought she'd make a good lawyer. She got in, barely, but that's another story of her resourcefulness. She worried she wasn't smart enough, and so she compensated by reading her textbooks. But after being highly ranked at the midterm, she decided that effort was entirely unnecessary. She tried really hard to start her assignments early, but for some reason, she could not ever get to these assignments except for just the day before. She supposed that she worked best under pressure, but she often had to run to school to hand her assignments in on time. Her friends seemed to have it all together, and they wondered why her summaries were never done until exam day. Sarah graduated, regular cum laude, which satisfied her perfectly fine. She articled at a big law firm who probably hired her because she wore a black suit to her interview. But firm life puzzled Sarah. Like when her urgent weekend work became irrelevant on a Friday night, but no one remembered to tell her. She'd ask questions like, why aren't students allowed in the lawyer's lounge? Or why can't I give this document directly to the partner? The lawyers didn't much like her questions, and she found their answers illogical. She didn't really want to return to the firm, which was very convenient because they actually didn't ask her to return. She tried to leave her next job to fate, but fate had other ideas. And so she walked her big self into her first in-house job at a big company in a big city. And her colleagues really liked at first that she was direct and friendly. They also liked that she worked really long hours, even when they had to go home to spend time with their families. Sarah hated managing timelines, but at least she could move deadlines around if she needed to. But when that wasn't possible, she vigorously shared her personal sense of urgency with her colleagues. She knew this annoyed them because they would ask her to work on her time management all the time, even though she'd answer their emails at 4 a.m, and she always met the ultimate deadline. The deadlines and the late nights were draining her, though, and after big projects, she was always burnt out. If she didn't catch a cold, she would go on a vacation. More accurately, she'd just leave on the next plane tomorrow. Soon, she realized the things that her colleagues had once loved about her, like that she was so thorough or that she always had the right answer, they weren't so refreshing to them anymore. Was it a personality clash? Sarah felt it was taking too much energy to please everyone, and so she left that job. After a short break, she started her own practice where she could manage her own time and she could work with only the very best clients. But she missed the urgency and the complexity of her old work. She also realized she missed having a dedicated assistant who it turned out was doing some of the very boring work and keeping her on schedule. Without any structure at all, Sarah became quite sad. She worried a lot about what she was going to do next. She had lots of ideas. She had so many ideas. But she had so many ideas that she couldn't take a single step forward. Then one night, at a party, a friend asked, "Sarah, do you think you have ADHD?" Sarah's diagnosis at 44 came as a huge shock to her, though maybe not to her mother. She had always had good grades and been successful. It had never crossed her mind that she had any problem at all. She wasn't distracted. She could sit still. Sure, she procrastinated sometimes, and maybe she had a hard time doing the things she didn't enjoy, like going to the gym or doing her chores. But didn't everyone? Or had she got it all wrong? Maybe her good grades and successes had stopped her from noticing that she was so different. Yes, she'd fooled herself into thinking that her symptoms were personality traits, choices she was making, that she was just she was just less apologetic about her challenges than everyone else. Now, Sarah realized an internal battle was afoot. She needed to decide whether she would continue to fit in or whether she would be brave and learn how to flourish in her own way. Should she spend her precious energy doing things the traditional way when she'd never thought traditionally at all? Should she work from 9 to 5 when clearly she worked much better from noon to 8? Did she have to accept that she would never enjoy doing legal research and do it anyway when she was really meant to write silly stories and share them with her friends on Zoom? Was she failing when she refused to do things that bored her? Or was she really just making the best use of her time and talents? Was she wrong to like herself just the way she was? Tune in next November for installment 2 of the story of Fit and Flourish. Just kidding. But I am going to stop a little bit abruptly here because it turns out Sarah's story is not over yet. Have you reflected on your life? Have you written your next chapter? Will you choose to flourish? The end.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Sarah, there. And just in the comments, as you'll see, it is bingo city everywhere over here. And I think I'll just highlight Kyle's comment here. But you need to work on your time management is the refrain to the ode of my evaluations. It's like as a kid where every year you need to write better. It's like it's all related. I still remember there was a lawyer I used to work with, and I will write a longer post on them at some point, and I've got to be careful with what I say to avoid identifying. But the short version of a very long story, which is also a classic ADHD way of saying I'm going to still meander and still not make it short, but it'll be shorter than the real version in my brain. But the very short version is the firm realized the person was struggling with their docketing and a whole host of other things. They did not realize the person was heavily neurodivergent, I believe not just ADHD, but other things. And they kept trying to approach it in a way without understanding these key insights, and they kept failing, and the person kept failing, and person kept blaming themselves because I don't think they understood it and the firm didn't understand. They just gave up. They're like, there's nothing we can do. And I'm just sitting there being like, well, the problem is like you haven't understood what they need and the reality. And that's what I hear over and over again, obviously, in your story and on that bingo card is all the things we've been told, we've heard. And it's almost like we're speaking a different language sometimes and we're trying to explain what we need. And I actually had this with my wife before she understood some of this stuff. She's like, I sort of thought you were like lying or exaggerating. I'm like, well, thanks for giving me the benefit of the doubt here, but I didn't have the ability to be like, oh, actually, like, let me explain it to you. And that vocabulary, those experiences, they go a long way. And I think, you did such a great job today, Sarah, of helping highlight so many of these things. And you'll see in the comments so many positive things there.
Yeah, when you talk about this time management thing and having the words to describe it, I think, in my speaking, one of the big themes I talk about is curiosity, because actually you should work on your time management is completely subjective and absolutely useless feedback. Getting curious and asking, what can I do to support you to manage your time is an absolute game changer, especially for people with ADHD. And as Annie pointed out, these are things that actually help every single person. How can I support you to do X rather than just making an assumption about how someone operates? And like you said, you probably didn't even know at one point that you had ADHD or that your experience was any different from anybody else's. That was certainly my experience. So anyway.
Yeah, I cannot stress enough what you just said about leading with curiosity and really trying to say, like, how can I support you? And I try to do that when I'm managing people. I sort of say, okay, it seems like you want to accomplish X. Like what can I do? What does support look like to you in this case? Because I don't want to be that micromanager. I don't want to be a burden. You tell me what I can do to help you accomplish what you want. And that, unfortunately, is not the default that a lot of people take. And I think, unfortunately, for many of us who've gone through these experiences, we tend to actually be a lot more empathetic in a lot of ways and better managers and leaders because we know that we've heard these things so many times. And we know we don't want to lead that way. So Sarah, thank you so much for sharing that story. Love the bingo card. And thanks so much for speaking today.
Thanks.
All right. Next up, we've got we've got, oh, I meant to get rid of Sarah Foley. There we go. All right. We've got Monica Johan. So Monica is a lawyer, like many of us, a consultant, and a facilitator with deep interrelated expertise in governance, in strategic planning, and workplace investigations. More importantly, she is a child of immigrants, a woman of color, she is neurodiverse, and she is an unabashed feminist. She lost her own firm and consulting in 2017 to work in ways that are authentic to who she is, that align with her values, and allow her to leverage everything she has to offer. In all she does, she is guided by the needs and interests of people facing intersecting oppressions that limit their safety, their well-being, and their opportunities in society. Today, Monica, you're talking all about becoming the lawyer you were meant to be. So, Monica, take it away from here.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, Aaron. Just so everyone knows, I, of course, was all like, how do I get online? Even though I know that we were told like 5 million times to, go in and test the links and everything beforehand. So yeah, typical me. But thank goodness I'm here on time. Oh, okay. So I am really glad to be here. And I have a really tough time with things that are super scripted. It's not really my style, but I've got a whole bunch of notes here. So hopefully I stay on track. And I'm sure that Aaron or Emma can come and pull me off stage if they really have to, if I start to meander. So I think I have a pretty typical story compared to, relative to a lot of other women in particular who were diagnosed with ADHD as adults. So I'm now 43. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 31 or 32. When I think back to when I was a kid, I do recognize like I was the quiet good girl in elementary school and in junior high school. I was a daydreamer. There were a lot of things that did come more easily to me, so I didn't really have to work hard at that young age, to get, good grades. But as I started to get older, really hit my teen years, those hyperactive aspects started to come out for me as well. And I recognize it now. I was pretty fidgety. Sometimes I just wanted to scream sitting in class. Like I just could not take it. And so I would skip a lot of class and then I would cram and then I would get whatever grades I needed and, to move on to the next thing. And eventually that next thing was university. And that's when things started to get really hard, just because of the sheer volume of work. And that's, I have a terrible short-term memory, as just about anybody with ADHD would tell you. And then I went to law school, and law school was a complete nightmare. Reading massive chunks of case law and writing case summaries over and over again did not suit my learning style. I had a lot of trouble concentrating, and I would skip class a lot because I was actually terrified that I would be called on. The whole Socratic method of teaching. And I was horrified thinking that I'd be called on and I would look like a dummy. And so my solution was, well, just don't go. Do, 5 million other things, do law journal, do whatever, do some research projects, do I always had a job. So do some of my job and then just cram. And I know these things can sound like a humble brag to someone who doesn't have ADHD and doesn't know what that experience is like. It was a nightmare. It was a complete nightmare. Like when people say ADHD is, my superpower or whatever, that doesn't work for me. It's something that I've learned to really lean into, and I've learned to really work with myself rather than work against myself. And there's actually a lot of things that I love about myself and I recognize are probably a part of having ADHD as well. That ability to make those connections, the creativity, the energy. But it was really, really hard. And I don't ever want to gloss over that. So, I think that when I was finally diagnosed in my early 30s, so at this point I was working as a regulatory lawyer in telecom and broadcasting. Don't ask me how that happened. It just did. And I was, working in corporate Canada in these environments. You come in every day and you're there. It was an ass and seat mentality in a lot of ways. And We'd have these really crazy periods when there would be CRTC hearings. And those were actually the periods probably where, having an ADHD brain, I was the most engaged and it was the most interesting. And there were times when I did actually find it exhilarating, just, being in those hearing rooms. But apart from that, I just wanted to scream sitting there like at my desk every day. It just was not me. And it was very much square peg, round hole, like that. It was not going to work. At some point, this really started to weigh on me. I had always really struggled with my mental health. I experienced a lot of childhood trauma and had been diagnosed with depression and generalized anxiety disorder when I was in my 20s. And I'd been through a lot of, treatment, like I was on meds and I was, doing therapy. Nothing ever really stuck. I honestly, when I look back, like, I don't know how I made it. Like I just felt like I was constantly white knuckling through life. And there was this day, like I'd gone to see a therapist. I'd been working in corporate Canada for a couple of years at that point, and I broke down in distress because I was so ashamed of all of the procrastinating, of the, feeling like I was a bad person because I just wasn't that interested in the work. And I felt ungrateful, and I felt lazy, and I felt like a bad employee and a bad person. And, and the therapist started to ask me a lot of questions. And then at some point she said, "You sound like a textbook case of ADHD. Have you ever talked to someone about that?" And I was like, "What?" And so, right. Because I like growing up in, the 80s and the early 90s, like when I was thinking ADHD, I was thinking about boys who couldn't sit still in class, which eventually I recognize now I was experiencing that later. But as anyway, you have this stereotype in your mind. And I was like, that's not me. So anyhow, I had a psychiatrist already, thankfully, because I was being treated for depression and anxiety. My psychiatrist was able to do an assessment and then got me started on meds. And once I found the right meds, it was like night and day. I think one of the biggest things that changed for me was that I was actually able to read books for pleasure again. I was actually able to read for pleasure again. And that was huge. That was something that somewhere along the way, I just couldn't, because I would read the same page or the same sentence or the same paragraph over and over. And if there wasn't that urgency driving me to read something because, there was a hearing or something, like I couldn't do it. So, I had this diagnosis, I'm taking these meds, but I was still working in this environment that just did not work for me. I ended up leaving. At some point, it just felt like survival, and it sounds so dramatic, I know, but I was so unhappy every single day. I hated my life. I absolutely hated it. So I ended up walking away from the Golden Handcuffs gig in 2016, had no idea what I would do, had no energy left to keep trying to be that square peg in a round hole. And I was thinking about chucking my license altogether. I felt like I was the worst lawyer. I felt like I didn't deserve to be a lawyer. And I was also terrified at the idea of going and hanging my own shingle. And I started to do a whole bunch of things, which I don't have enough time to tell you about because I can realize now I'm already almost kind of maybe over time. So, Erin, hopefully you'll give me like a minute or two of grace. So fast forward to today, I've got a legal practice and a consulting practice. And I honestly never thought I'd be where I am right now. When I decided to go down this path, I was like, I'm going to have to go find like a job in like, a year, but I'll give myself some time. And anyway, it's way beyond anything that I ever thought was possible. And the whole journey has been incredible. There's tons of ups and downs. And one step forward, two steps back, like that's definitely, been part of my experience. But there's also been a lot of self-discovery, and I wanted to share a few of the things that have helped me to learn to work with myself rather than to work against myself, rather than working against myself by trying to fit into a mold that I just don't fit into. So first and foremost, and this might sound incredibly obvious, but like do work that I actually care about and work that plays to my strengths. So I am not somebody who can sit in in an office in a cubicle every single day 9 to 5 and be happy doing like little things. I like to do big picture things. I like strategy. I like to think about organizational dynamics. I love building relationships with people and building relationships with clients. And so today I work mostly with organizations that are in the social impact sector, not exclusively, but mostly. And clients will come to me for, one of two things. Like, so they come to me and because they're looking for a lawyer to help them work through really tough governance challenges, often a governance crisis, which is and there'll be a corresponding workplace crisis going on, an HR crisis as well. And, I'm like, yep, let me at it. And then there's the clients who are like, hey, we're doing this forward looking, trying to figure out where we're going as an organization. We need to get everyone together to have these conversations that are really important. And we need to make some decisions and come to agreement. And so they're looking for someone to design a process and deliver that process so that they can, make well-informed strategic decisions about how it is that they're going to move ahead together. And I absolutely love this. I've got a balance of work going, well, balance might not be the right word, but I've got work coming in on both sides. So there's the work that, yes, it's crisis driven often and urgent, but then I can balance it out with projects that are more big picture thinking. It's more about building and creating in a different way. And that really helps me. So figure out what you want to do, play to your strengths. Therapy, I've done lots of therapy over my life. My therapist right now has helped me hugely to work through childhood trauma, but she also specialized working with people with ADHD. So she's really helped me to understand and interpret my own behavior so that I can better meet my own needs. So if I'm procrastinating, for example, I'm putting things off my to-do list and I've gone into sort of that someone called it the ADHD paralysis. Like for me, I call it overwhelm. And I know now, usually that means there's too much input going into my brain. So that might mean that I need to just shake myself off and go and have lunch, especially if I've forgotten to eat. Or maybe I have to take a whole day off. Or maybe I just need to go and like lay down in a dark room and not engage with anything for a while. And my boyfriend, my partner, he calls that like going into my like little cave. And I just need to do that so that I could like decompress. She's introduced me to the concept of gamifying and also to help me to see that I don't have to, set my work schedule from day to day, week to week, month to month, the way that so many other people have to do. Like if I just don't want to work in a certain week, I can set my life up in a way to make that happen. So fighting yourself and fighting your energy all the time is exhausting. So to the maximum extent possible, if you can go with your energy, like just do that. So setting up your schedule and environment as much as possible so you can get into flow and do deep work and stay there until you run out of steam. That can also be incredibly helpful. I do my best work early in the day, first thing in the morning, sometimes as early as 4:30 a.m. I have my coffee and my dog and my cat cuddling with me. And I will just do that work that takes a lot of that thinking and drafting. And I can get a lot done in like 4 or 5 hours at that part of the day, rather than, starting at like 12 or 1 p.m. after having a whole bunch of meetings and spending a lot of energy on other stuff. Like just work with it, figure out your energy flow and work with that. And the last thing I'm just going to say is make as much time as you can for play and creativity. So for me, this is about art making, and visual art is a big part of it. So I'm not actually in my office today. I'm working from my my yoga painting room at home. And this is where I wanted to be so that I could just show you really quickly. Like I've got a whole bunch of paintings there. I've got a whole bunch of paintings down here, hiding behind a rowing machine that I don't actually use the way that I intended to. But anyway, so Erin is back. So I'm going to stop talking.
Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing. I know you'll see the comments after. People were loving it, as was I. Just a couple things quickly before we jump to Mike.
Yeah.
I think you described as a kid, you're the classic, misdiagnosed female who is presenting as inattentive, and everyone's looking for the hyperactive boy, and of course, therefore, people are sort of treating you that way. You talked about therapy, and I had this experience too, where like most therapists don't understand neurodiversity, they don't understand ADHD. And I saw this in the comments. So you got to find someone who gets it. There were so much wasted time and frustration on my end when I started therapy with somebody who I thought was supposed to know stuff and didn't. And like I was the one who figured out the ADHD, not them. And of course, they were treating me as if I was purely neurotypical, which I was most definitely not. Square peg, round hole, you talked about, and all that negative self-talk, and obviously the implications there. Doing work that plays to your strengths that you care about. At the end of the day, that's the only way it's going to work. And that's the theme I heard throughout. Like, again, it's just not going to work the other way. But the nice thing is we got a lot of strengths. We got to be careful with using the word superpowers because there are a lot of drawbacks too and a lot of challenges most of us have been through, but put in the right circumstances to let ourselves thrive. There are huge opportunities there. And it's funny, as you were describing yourself in school, I think you said fidgety, you found class boring. I mean, I think that was probably an experience for a lot of us. The education system in general is so far behind where it needs to be, but especially for people with ADHD, it is so terribly suited.
Yeah.
And so when I launched For All Academy, which is my main training thing, I mean, I built most of the classes. They are built from somebody who has ADHD and other neurodiversities who knows that this needs to be engaging. We need to use different methods. If we do this in the normal way, I wouldn't want to attend. And if I don't want to attend, which was the case for a lot of stuff I went to as a student, then why would anyone else want to be there? So I think there is so much value in, again, how people with ADHD give presentations, how they educate people, all that sort of stuff. But Monica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Erin, and thanks for all that grace. Okay.
No problem at all. We've got buffer built in for a reason. All right. Our last speaker of the day here is Mike, and Mike has disappeared off camera behind the scenes, but I'm pretty sure hopefully he is there. I'll add Mike to the stage momentarily, and hopefully it is working on his end. So Mike is the Chief Community Officer at Law Insider. He is the author of Lawyer Forward, and Mike, hopefully you can get that camera working again. Author of Lawyer Forward, Finding Your Place in the Future of Law. And if we get this to work, and he was here for ages waiting patiently, he'll be talking today. His talk is called Undiagnosed, Discovering My ADHD. But Mike, I cannot see you. Hopefully we can get this sorted out shortly. But try talking for a second. Let's see if it's working. I cannot hear you, unfortunately. You may want to log out and log back in, but that's okay. I got plenty of stuff we can talk about in the meantime from the group while we wait for that to happen. So let me give everyone a little snapshot of what's going to happen. We are running, of course, slightly behind schedule, but none of you really know the schedule anyways, and that's fine. It's an ADHD segment, so of course we're running slightly behind schedule. And the last thing I want to do is delay talks. Mike is back, so I'll put him on in a second. He's going to do his talk. We're giving Mike the grace of whatever time he needs as well. And then after that, we're going to move into some amazing conversations that matter on a separate platform. So it's been a great chance, not just for the people who've been speaking today, but for everyone else to have conversations, whether you have ADHD, whether you're an ally, you want to learn more. We've designed an amazing hour from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern that will follow this, so stay tuned. Just because Mike will be our last formal talk does not mean we are done with the day. So Mike, we're back. We're ready to go. Undiagnosed, Discovering Your ADHD. Mike, over to you.
Thank you. I want to tell you guys about a lesson I learned from a tree. So in August of the year 2000, I went on my first date with a pretty girl named Nicole. In September, 3 weeks later, we were engaged. In November, we got married on a Tuesday, the 14th. In fact, yesterday was our 23rd anniversary. In March, a few months after that, we were pregnant. In December, we had our first son on a Wednesday. I decided on a Thursday that I was going to go to college. So on a Friday, I quit my job. We packed up the truck. We moved to Utah. I didn't know anything about going to college in Utah. I decided I was going to go to one of the most competitive schools for entry in the country. Kids spend their entire lives thinking they were going to go to BYU. And I just showed up with not much of a plan. I thought my 2.3 GPA from high school and my total lack of application, I'd be able to get in, but through some luck and some gaming of the system, I was able to get in. I started out pre-dental. Then I was a chemistry major. Then I was a linguistics major. Then I was a Middle East studies and Arabic major. And then I was a history major. I decided to take the LSAT on a Saturday. I didn't know shit about the LSAT. I didn't know anything about law school. Nobody in my family had gone to law school. I didn't know what it meant to be a lawyer, but I scored well enough on the test that I could get into the school where we lived at the time in Austin. So I went to law school. That was so weird. As Monica said, like, this was just the weirdest environment. You go in and nobody gives you any homework. You start out, at the beginning of the semester, and they talk for 4 months, and you're supposed to be reading stuff for 4 months, and then they give you a test, and that's it. All these other kids were studying for 14 hours a day or something. I'm sitting here, a man with a wife and 4 kids, getting in whatever studying I could, telling myself, I'll have time. The semester's all the way at the end. The test is all the way at the end. I'm sure I'll be fine. So I was not fine. I did not do very well in law school. In the middle of law school, I was given a diagnosis, an ADHD diagnosis. I guess I knew what ADHD was. I had kids, as I heard on an SNL bit recently with Pedro Pascal. He said, my son doesn't have the ADD. He just likes to jump, I knew that from my kids that they had that. So for me to be diagnosed with it was a bit weird. I was given medication, and my whole relationship with time completely changed. Right? I was able to get so many things done. I was able to understand what it was, what the semester end coming looked like, what I was supposed to be doing. But so much of who I was didn't change. I didn't notice my wife, who was having an emotional breakdown at the time. My wife's mother had died. She has a condition that we didn't have a name for yet. And she laid in bed for an entire year looking at a wall. When I had ADHD that was untreated, I didn't notice her because I was rolling. When I had ADHD that was treated, I didn't notice her, and I took her to a mental health institution. I took her to the hospital on a Tuesday, and I looked for divorce papers on a Thursday. I make impulsive decisions. People talk about the superpowers of ADHD. Sometimes I believe that. Sometimes I think that's real. I like the way my brain works. And sometimes I think it might be bullshit. I suffer. My kids beg for my time. I have debt that I can't explain. I eat food that I shouldn't. And my wife worries. I make incredibly impulsive decisions. So it wouldn't surprise you that on a Friday, I bought a farm. Okay, that doesn't tell the whole story. I don't know shit about farming. Okay, I didn't grow up around farming. I don't know what a farm is. But you remember in COVID in 2020, all the middle-aged white guys were dealing with existential angst by starting podcasts. They didn't know what to do with all this free time that they suddenly had. What am I supposed to do? Talk to my family? So they started podcasts. I already had a podcast because I had already dealt with that particular angst. And I started Lawyer Forward. I promise eventually there will be content there. So I already had a podcast. I couldn't do that. I certainly wasn't going to figure out how to do the bread, right? Everybody was doing the sourdough bread. I wasn't figuring that out. I'm not crafty enough to do any of that stuff. So I started gardening. I put things in the ground. And it gave me the weirdest relationship with time. It started to shift the way I thought. Annual plants specifically operate kind of in quarters, in these 3-month chunks. You plant them, you wait an amount of time, you do the right inputs, they give you a flush of whatever it is that they're trying to give you, and then they die off. I started to think in quarters myself. I found a book called 12-Week Year, which really helped with that. It put out the horizon a little bit. So instead of constantly impulsively jumping at all these little micro decisions, letting email drive me, letting phone calls drive me, letting all these really short-term interactions drive me, I started to think in these longer-term projects and doing these longer-term projects. You see, ADHD people have something called time blindness. They used to think of it as sort of a secondary symptom, but now they're talking about it as one of the principal things that is crucial to diagnosing ADHD. Time understanding is very complex. There are a lot of systems in our brain that give us a sense of how long something is taking, how long something should take. People with ADHD are terrible at this. We don't feel time in the same way. Time speeds up on us. We're really bad at estimating how long a future project will take us. We're really, really bad at defining how long the thing took us last time we did it. We have no relationship with time. As a result, what we tend to do is adopt others' concept of time. We let other people's deadlines drive our concepts of what we should be doing on a day-to-day basis. It fills our day with shoulds because we don't have that deadline sense. I still make impulsive decisions. I do not take medication now. That's a whole other story, but I still make those impulsive decisions. So on a random day, my wife and I were visiting Chicago, and we decided we should move here. We come to Chicago a lot, and every time we come here, we say we should move here. But in this particular March, we decided we should move to Chicago. So in March, April, May, we signed up for an apartment, this apartment that you can see behind me in downtown. That's Navy Pier right over there. We are deeply downtown. Our daughter said, who was 20, said, I have this condition that mom has, and I can't really live on my own. I need you to keep providing for me. We were paying for an apartment, and I didn't want to keep doing that, so we decided to buy a piece of property. So we bought a farm. We bought a farm about an hour south of Chicago, totally random, and decided that we should plant an orchard. So I started doing that. I started to plant trees. I had never thought in the timeline of trees in my life. As a kid, we moved around a lot. I didn't have any sense of place that would root me in one specific place. We moved probably 40 times before I was 18, at least 30 times before I was 18. So I didn't have that sense of place. And the idea that I would invest in something that had a timeline that went out as far as a tree didn't make any sense to me. But I started to plant trees. I followed all the advice. I don't know if you've ever seen a bare root plant before, but they send you this plant. It's a stick and it's got little roots on the bottom, but it's basically a stick with legs. And I started to plant these trees. I would dig a hole 3 times the size of the root ball. I would put the plant in the ground, make sure not to put compost in there. You got to backfill with the soil, the native soil, so it'll reach under there. So I did that. I put the compost down around the top. I put mulch on top of that. I didn't stake it because it needs to be resistant to the wind. I gave it the water that it needed. And I looked down at this tiny stick with legs and I said, one day you'll be a tree. And the tree looked up at me and said, I already am. Time is central to a concept of task-based lawyering. We haven't had this concept of task-based lawyering for very long. I wrote in my book about how we built the business model of lawyering. It's only about 100 years old. But now we say, what is it to be a lawyer? Oh, lawyers do law stuff. Well, what's law stuff? It's the stuff that lawyers do. Okay, so what exactly should lawyers be doing with their day? They should be blocking out law stuff in time. Time is central to how we think of lawyering, specifically how other people think of the quality of our lawyering. Because of that, there was a report that made me so mad. And I apologize in advance to my friends at Clio. The people who create the Legal Trends report are some of my favorite people. But the Clio Legal Trends report makes me so mad. I wrote about it in the book Lawyer Forward, and I thought about why did that make me so angry? If you remember the Legal Trends report coming out, the take-home message was that lawyers are only billing 2.8 hours per day. That was the big dramatic take-home. Why are we only billing 2.8 hours per day? We could do more. If we can get rid of all the inefficiencies of the stuff that we shouldn't be doing as lawyers, if we can manage our time we could do 6 hours of billable work. We could do 9 hours of billable work. Why are you only doing 3 hours of billable work? And I was so mad. I'll tell you why I was so mad. Have you ever done the thing as a lawyer where you're looking at a document and you're trying to find that one magical comma? You remember in law school, people were talking about those cases with the one magical comma, and because that comma was in the wrong place, it completely changed the meaning of the document, and somebody lost millions of dollars. And so here's you sitting in your butt in seat trying to find the magical comma that if you just find it. I'm not going to do 3 more hours of comma looking. I promise you, in the 4th hour, that comma could be running around in a gorilla suit, waving sparklers. I'm not going to see that comma because I don't have that kind of attention to give to a document. Even when I was practicing in family law, it might not have been a comma that I was looking for, but sitting butt in seat, ignoring the drama of my own family so I can care about the drama of your family, I don't have that much to give. The idea that we would make everything around me more efficient so that I could spend more time and more time doing that kind of deep, attentive work totally ignored my spoons. Spoons. Um, if you know anybody who has chronic pain, as my wife does, she has a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It is a condition of the connective tissue. She has really weird connective tissue issues. It means she has superpowers, like they say we have. She is flexible, so you have a lot of dancers who have EDS. She has soft, supple skin. She will look young into her older age. But she doesn't talk about the superpowers of EDS. She lays in bed, curls in a ball, and cries in pain. And so the people who have these kind of chronic pain conditions, they talk about spoons. There was a lady who was trying to explain to a friend who didn't understand her life why she sort of sections her life off the way she does. Why does she budget her day the way she does? The two were sitting in a restaurant. So the lady said, well, take a look at this spoon, right? I only have so many spoons. And if I use the spoon over here, then I can't use the spoon over there. So I have to be mindful of where I put my spoons. For me, I had a limited amount of attention spoons, of attentive care spoons. I can only go give so much. The idea that I was going to take that 3 hours of spoons and expand it is nonsensical, right? There was no more spoon to give. And so I had to rethink how I allocate my spoons. I had to figure out how to make my 3 hours, we'll say, of spoon availability so profitable that it'll cover the other hours. I wasn't looking to do more hours. I was looking to make those hours as profitable as possible. This kind of gets to one of the things, another side rant that really bugs me about the way we talk about the legal industry. We talk about meaning and purpose and our higher mission and our higher cause. And the bad guys at the big firms, it's all about money to them. It is all about money, at least the way you're doing it right now. It is your job. You are trading a limited resource of whatever your spoons are. Those limited resources might be about time, they might be about energy, they might be about attention, about cognitive capacity, whatever your limits are, you're trading those limits for the limited resource of money, right? And so you're playing a game. You're playing a board game with scales of these limited resources, and you're trying to figure out, how do I leverage those in a way that creates enough profitability so that I don't have to spend more time or energy or cognitive capacity or give a shit, because I have a limited amount of those things to give. I need to figure out how to live within the capacity of my resources. I wrote about this in Lawyer Forward. I refer to it as the legal supply chain. The idea that when you start to build on those things that increase your profitability in limited capacity, you're going to find holes all around you. Trees do this thing that they don't generally stand. You know how we do this with lawns, where there's like lawn and then there's like a tree? Trees don't do that. That is not very normal at all. They live in what the permaculture world refers to as guilds. It's very cool. We're very cool people. So a tree, when you plant a tree, you want to build up a guild around it that do different functions. Maybe you have a comfrey plant that is a nutrient accumulator. It digs deep into the soil, brings nutrients up that would otherwise have to wait for volcanic activity, brings it to the surface. You chop and drop those leaves. Maybe you have flowering plants that will bring pollinators that will come and show up to pollinate your peaches. Maybe you have a vine that goes up the tree that captures more sunlight and puts those exudates, those sugars, down into the soil for the tree. The point is that the tree never lives alone. That's not normal at all. What we tend to do as lawyers, and what I talk about in Lawyer Forward, we tend to think that we are trees alone in a field and that we're supposed to do all of the things. Meanwhile, we have no concept of time. So we are adopting the time concept and the priorities of people outside of us on our own, because we're supposed to do it on our own. That's not what trees do, right? Trees operate in guilds and they operate on different timelines. There's a quote that goes around a lot of these communities that I'm in about trees. It's from a person named Rabindranath Tagore. He said, "The one who plants trees, knowing that he or she will never sit in their shade, has at least started to understand the meaning of life." The way that's often explained might be bullshit. I don't know what that person meant when they said that, but the idea that the meaning of life is to create generational altruism seems like nonsense to me because that's not how trees operate. The tree will give you shade in your lifetime. Unless you're a 95-year-old skydiver with no attention to detail, you're going to live long enough to get shade from most trees. You're going to live long enough to get fruit from most trees. But what that definition of the value of a tree assumes is that social utility is the meaning of life. Getting to the point that you provide something that gives later people utility, that is what it is to be a tree. The tree doesn't know. When I plant a chestnut tree, that tree is going to spend 1,000 years just being a tree. The tree doesn't know that it's going to provide shade for you. It doesn't know that it's going to provide food for you. It doesn't know that it's going to provide a place for birds and animals to feed the ecosystem. The tree is just busy being the tree. The tree's not on my timeline. The tree's not thinking about my utility. It's just being a tree. One of the weird things about my brain is that I don't remember most of my
Looks like we lost Mike in a very interesting pose here, which may have been deliberate on his end, clearly. Hopefully we'll get Mike back shortly. Mike, if you can hear me, we cannot hear you. So I'll just leave him up on the stage for now in that pose. And I feel like there was a great story about to start there. And if Mike is able to get back in, we'll let him back up to finish up that story. In terms of just wrapping up some of those thoughts, though, I'll remove Mike out of a courtesy to him. In terms of wrapping up some of those thoughts, there, things I was hearing from Mike. As always, I always wonder, how are these stories going to connect? I think that's a classic ADHD thing. There is a plan, and you know what the plan is, and often for other people, it's struggling to figure out how you're going to get there. And I feel like I see it in so many people with ADHD who write. You can see it in my writing. Lots of parentheses, lots of brackets, because everything is connected. For those of you who follow Alex Sue, if you follow his Substack, you will see classic ADHD writing there as well in a great way. I like it with lots of footnotes where there's like other points he wants to take in different directions. You see it all the time, just in different ways of storytelling. And I think people with ADHD tend to make great storytellers, but often in a less typical way there. I think Mike was talking about law school, how there's no assessment until the end of the semester, and I saw Annie and others mentioning that in the comments too. There's no urgency, as Annie mentioned, one of those 4 key pillars. And I always think if I had to do a PhD, I'd be a disaster. Like, you want to give me 5 years or 3 years with no deadline till the end, and you want me to be self-accountable along the way for getting there? That's just not going to happen. Time blindness, or maybe a different term to use, as someone noted in the comment, but those challenges with time are so real for so many of us with ADHD, and they are, I think, for many of us, a huge, huge challenge. I can tell you that an Android phone allows you to have 100 alarms, because that's the maximum, because I have it. I hit the maximum, and I've got to delete the old ones. And literally every client meeting I have, I've got an alarm or a Google alert or something, because otherwise I'm not going to be there. It's going to be 7 minutes away, and I'm going to lose track of time in those 7 minutes. And as Mike mentioned, he makes incredibly impulsive decisions rather, and suffers from impulsivity. And I think for many of us, yeah, that impulsivity, that executive function, is obviously a challenge. Before we jump into the final part today, we were going to do a little kind of challenge for all of you in the group. But rather than doing it the traditional way, I want to do it in a different way here. So my question for you to answer in the comments is this: what do you think has stopped your organization for doing more for its neurodiverse members, including having more internal conversations and educating people? Are they afraid of knowing what to say? Do they not have the knowledge? Are they worried about having to accommodate? What do you think is that thing? Because there's a lot of ideas I have for initiatives I want to do going way beyond this summit, but I am curious to hear from many of you. What do you think is that barrier that stopped people so far from having those conversations? So take a moment to think about that. Just add in your answers into the chat. So I see fear of losing money and clients. I see Sarah, and I agree with this completely. The gap between good intentions and understanding the issue. And to me, that's, I think, largely a knowledge gap. At least if people are operating with good intentions, that's better than bad intentions. I think for a while I attributed certain intentions from my former colleagues as bad intentions, and I now realize they were just misguided intentions. Let's put it that way at best. Owen, I see your comment here. The last time I told anyone at a firm I had ADHD, they incredulously asked if they needed to hire me a mother. So now I own the firm and answer to nobody. And I unfortunately have also found I sort of need to own the firm or run the firm, or else I'm not going to be happy. And obviously I'm able to run things in a way, or try to run things in a way that takes into account people have neurodiversity, other kinds of diversity, but really that gap between what other people would expect and their intentions in reality are so different. And I love this from Shannon. They misunderstand that intent, or the difference between intent and impact. And that is an enormous challenge for people with ADHD. All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining these talks. I'm sorry we lost Mike at the end. Maybe he'll record some of this separately. And as Jonathan notes, we often make great self-employed sole practitioners. But at the end of the day, we make great employees, too, if we're in organizations that allow us to thrive, that can understand our unique strengths and also our unique challenges. Because as Mike and others have said, we can talk about superpowers all day, and I do believe there are certain things where we have superpowers, but let's not deny that this is an executive function disorder, is a medical condition, and it causes a lot of stress and grief and challenges for so many of us. And there is a long way to go in society, but especially in the legal profession, for us to get where we need to get to in this profession. So Amr, if you can add to the chat the link to Gather Round. This is the place where we're going to keep this conversation going for those of you who are able to stay. Amr's just added it, which is fantastic. So this is a different platform. So please, we're done with this part. We're going to end it momentarily. Click that link, jump in there, whether you have ADHD or not. The questions are all framed in a way and deliberately built in a way where nobody has to discuss anything they don't want to. We had some amazing conversations yesterday for people who joined the mental health part and the business development part. So hop on over there. We'll get it started momentarily. It's a great way to meet people, to network, but more importantly, to continue the conversations and see other people who are interested in these things. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you all learned a lot. I hope things resonated with you. And we're just getting started here. We've got big plans for 2024 when it comes to pushing the envelope on neurodiversity in this profession. And if you have ideas, send me a note on LinkedIn, send me an email, whatever. I am just getting started on that ideation process. And as you can imagine, as someone with ADHD, I've got a lot more ideas that I'm going to be able to execute on. And we'll see what the final thing is. So that link is in the chat, in the comments there. If you're having trouble, just send me a note on LinkedIn. Kristen, I will send you a copy to that link as well. Everybody, we are done here. Head on over to Gather Round, and thank you so much for joining us today.